Good afternoon. Well, it's a little chillier. Of course, it's later in the day, which is the key. In my experience, depending upon how long the day is, 4, 5, 6, you start getting into the chillier time of the day. So the sun's out, a little cloudy, nothing special. So what do we talk about today? Well, given my interest in the law and process, and I believe process is outcome determinative, meaning if I get to write the rules, then you're going to likely end up where I want you to end up. So we are concerned about police who overstep their bounds. And we had an instance in the Carolinas where one man was taping the traffic stops to catch abuse. And he was told in no uncertain terms that he couldn't do that and that was forbidden and so forth. And he took it to court, and the court said he had the First Amendment right to discuss it, and that it was of interest to the public how justice was being administered. And so he was upheld for taking those pictures. Okay, so that's a happy result. Now, the next result, though, is the one that concerns us about police, and it goes like this. He sues him for damages, but he's told the officer is immune unless the policy was a policy of the local government. Now, the officer, committed it, and if there was no policy, isn't that worse? And if there was a policy, he didn't rebut it. He did exactly what a court has decided is a violation of the First Amendment rights of an individual to tape these traffic stops. Okay, so extrapolate. They beat the living daylights out of somebody without cause, perhaps even without a real charge, just a traffic stop. Are they immune from the civil suit under Section 1983 of Title 42 because cops are immune? That's the question that's on the Hill. Because until people are going to feel deterred by what could happen to them if they get it wrong, perhaps we will not have good police work. And those who have a good sense of it may not have the courage to come forward and say, hey, you shouldn't do that, Joe, or Larry, or Harry, or whatever the name is. So I think that's instructive of one of the key political issues. And it must drive any fair-minded person crazy that our Congress can't pass a law that deals with that. Why? Because they bend their knee to whomever gives them the most money and enforcement or might embarrass them so they wouldn't get reelected. Terrible, isn't it? Meanwhile, our General Assembly, they have a session like other states do, in which the two chambers have a crossover, meaning they send the House to the Senate to the House, they send their bills, and then they confer, and that's what gets passed. If a bill hasn't appeared in both houses, it's a good chance it's not going to become law. And then the law becomes effective later in the year, usually in July. So, in this category, you may recall that they've changed the name of our local football team from something involving skins to the Commanders, which I think is a terrible name. And I mean, you can't think of anything else. Well, that's what they came up with. And the man who owns the team, I think he's selling his house. He's in bad trouble. And the General Assembly said, we're going to stop the study about putting a stadium for the Commanders in Virginia. So I get a kick out of that. There's a nice bike coming along the way. It does make me wish I had my bike, but not that much. And when I had my bike the last time for over several years, stopping just before COVID, I really loved getting out on it. And then the dirt roads and stuff like that didn't make it as much fun. It was too slippery. But he was riding just fine. Okay, so enough of that unpaid interruption. it's very interesting how we are funding Zelensky in Ukraine. We're very good, well, I don't know if we're very good, but we're good about being involved. And at some point early on, despite my friends who think I shouldn't feel so strongly we should be supporting Zelensky in Ukraine, and I do, and I'm a peacenik, but this is different. This is very different. This is a modern age threat. This is serious. This is not talking about, crazy possibilities of what could happen. It is happening. And we see movement in Russia and China and Korea, and we can't really ignore it. And we can't ignore it and have European security taken seriously. So we have done things like given target information to the Ukraine, and that's improved their effectiveness in battle. But Zelensky is still knocking on doors, and there's an interesting picture of him with the King of England, trying to get him to give him planes in the sky. And we won't do that. And I've mentioned it before, but I go back to Vindeman, who said that the advisors in the White House, he thought, wanted to go so far and no further. In other words, they wanted Russia to feel pain, but they weren't sure they wanted Zelensky to win. You can't hold back on something like this and win. Not when you're talking about the players that we're talking about and the political history, but there it is. Now, talking about players, I only occasionally watch football. When I was younger, I really was crazy about it. But one of the things that's striking is what these men put their bodies through because of the passion they have for the sport and for the remuneration they get when they play really hard. But they also risk terrible, terrible illnesses. Disabilities, concussions, joint pain, arthritis, herniated discs, and so forth. And here's my gripe. The NFL is pushing back on these claims about health. That's just wrong. And all those people who watch the sport, again, we the people, they tell the leagues, you got to take care of these players. I visited a good friend of mine who's a really good football player in college ball when we were at college at Fordham. And my parents convinced me I shouldn't be playing football. Even though we'd be fighting in the streets, I'd be doing martial arts classes and competition. That was different. And so I'm visiting Frank Keefe, and he's a little concerned, although it's not evident that it's a problem, about how he hit his head and what he may have done to his body. Now, he looks as robust as ever, but I'm glad to say, as far as I can tell, he has the fear that as he gets older, it may be a problem. But it didn't seem to be when I was with him now, a couple of years ago. And but these players, this is serious for them. They're crashing into moving walls. These people who come after them. So tell your NFL leaders, take care of these guys. Come on, let's do the right thing. Finally, I saw Ruth Marcus was down on Mark Pomerantz yesterday. I hadn't seen it. And she really went after him. And her area of concern seemed to be about the book and the hypocrisy and the way Mark went about it. And I think if you're going to stake out a position and say in a letter that gets leaked to the Times, it was a grave failure of justice, I think you got to back that up, or you should remain completely silent. You can't let that go. You have to be involved. You have to be engaged. You have to get some skin in the game, basically. And Mark tried to have it both ways. Get money from a book, get some publicity, be thought the good guy, but not take the hard shot against Bragg. And that's the unfortunate thing, because Mark has now muddied it so much that Bragg is not being scrutinized as he should be. Because I don't understand why you could have offered that evidence at trial against the corporation and the CFO that included the role of Trump and not have made that case with Trump and prosecuted him. And I suspect Bragg is trying to catch up now with the Ladies of the Night case, and to show that he's really there and he's straight and he's on top of it. Well, I just don't feel that he handled this right, justly, fairly. And I just wish that somebody would have investigated it back when it happened. And somebody should review the paperwork that recommended the prosecution and what the other side said. You can always find 100 ways not to do something that's challenging. America has got an epidemic of that. What is the thing about prosecutors in this country? None of them seem to want to prosecute. The biggest case in history, perhaps, a former president of the United States who was evil and tried to take the country to the cleaners and overthrow it. Jesus, why isn't that a big story? So that's it. Enough of this here I am in the Cathedral of Trees, and I'm looking forward to the day there'll be buds, but there are weeks to go before that'll happen. All the best. Bye-bye.